Yeah. I like this, though. I like recording without headphones.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like
You're in the
like you're in a
Matrix.
podcast. Yeah. We're just having a normal life conversation. So like this TikTok thing. My only concern is I don't want TikTok on my phone.
What's
Like
on
I
my
don't
phone?
want it on my phone.
Okay.
Like,
Are
are
you
you
really
'cause-
important?
No, I'm not that worried about all that stuff, but I am like, I'm concerned about the safety of TikTok and like how much they can steal your information and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So is there any chance that my laptop is getting
TikToked? Right now?
TikToked? I mean, your phone's only
No.
like 6 inches away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a proximity thing. It's airborne. It's like COVID.
No, but I think it is.
You
I mean, I don't know. How
don't think it
worried are
is.
you about TikTok?
Um,
I'm going to say 0.
I think that pretty much I would say over half the applications on your phone probably use your personal information, listen to you, and do things that most people would consider not like they're not comfortable with.
Okay. Data privacy. Okay. I don't know. I'm not finding anything. I'm terrible
To support your argument.
I'm terrible at Googling stuff. Like, don't you ever like wish you could just Google a question and it would give it to you?
I thought that was how
Perfectly.
Google worked.
It's supposed to. Okay. I don't know what's so bad about it.
So
They're probably all bad.
I mean,
I just
don't-
have like kind of a TikTok scare thing.
Okay, I don't think TikTok is any more ominous or malicious than like Facebook or Instagram is. I think it's also like maybe instead of like say TikTok is linked to China, like there have been some theories and everything. I don't think they're any worse than giving it to a giant multinational corporation like Meta.
Yeah, most of what I'm reading is that TikTok has contributed to the rise of mental health problems among young people.
Now that I believe 100%. Like honestly, if it wasn't for our podcast and the fact that you can get horse clientele through social media, I think I would ditch it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that's always something I feel like I struggle with because I mean, it's great. It is just like it's like a dopamine machine, right? Like you can just be on it. I know I can be on it all day, you know, go down some rabbit hole or whatever. But it's also a really powerful tool. Like, you know, you see like horses for sale and trailers for sale and you can sell stuff and then you can see horse events and you know, we're building a business that's basically an online business and we're trying to grow all our stuff. So it's like this really powerful tool, but also it could like turn around and rot your brain if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine not having these tools at our disposal. But like the thing with TikTok to me, like, did you see that video where in Congress that senator got Mark Zuckerberg to apologize to the parents of all the kids who have been damaged by Instagram?
No, I didn't see that.
It was really interesting, but like this congressman kept hammering it home. And you kind of think about it and you're like, yeah, that tool was not around until that guy made it. And you kind of feel bad for that guy. Cause I mean, I don't know, like listening to his story from early on, he was just, it would be like us just having a cool idea and be like, hey, this will be awesome. And like 10 years down the road, now you have this thing you built that everybody's using and interacting. And even though you're the guy that made it, you're one guy and you have thousands. I mean, there's got to be, how many users do you think Instagram has?
I mean, probably close to 1 billion.
Close to 1 billion, right?
Yeah.
So is it really the one guy's fault that made it? Or is it the billion users and like several million, you know, influencers who are really driving the direction that Instagram is going? I don't know. But when you see the one guy standing there, you're like, okay, you could apologize. I guess it's your fault for making it, but it's a much bigger problem than one guy. Either way, it made me think about it to the point where it is kind of a serious thing. That is a huge cultural riff. And like, you've got kids that have committed suicide because of the stuff they see on there that they wouldn't have seen anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be heavy for the guy who, like, I don't really think that is his fault, but like in the world, like in the timeline of history, yeah, I mean, he made it, so it's kind of his fault. But like the direction it's gone and the damage it's done, I don't know if you could just call it his fault. You know, that's kind of a narrow-minded approach.
Right.
They're looking for a scapegoat.
Yeah, and I think when you apologize for something like that, they're almost implying that there was malintent from the beginning.
Exactly.
Like, oh, I'm going to go and just ruin everyone's lives. Yeah. You know, because that's like, I don't know. That's like the guy, you know, one of these giant manufacturers of cigarettes, right? Like having to go and apologize or something. Like, yeah, you made this thing, and I don't think like social media has happened like in our lifetime, right? Like when we were born, no one understood like what was going to happen and what this could be. So, which means you didn't understand the negative parts of it. And there's a lot of negative parts of it. I think it really messes with someone's brain chemistry when you're always looking at someone's highlight reel, like someone else's highlight reel, you know? Like I find myself when I do stuff like this, like go on trips like this and like come down and we're like involved and focused on other stuff all day. Like I'm way happier then, whereas like I'm at home and I'm involved doing stuff, but then I might take a minute and like sit on my phone for 15 minutes, like, and just look at junk basically, you know, like basically junk food for your brain. And, and it's like, it's tough, but all that to be said, do you really think it's the, to me, it's like that classic argument. Is it the guy who made Doritos? Like, is he responsible for obesity? You know, like, I think it's hard to, I think it's hard to peg it on him. And I think people should use social media in moderation and really think about like why they're using it. Because I know for me personally, it's had a lot of negative effects on my life. Nothing detrimental, like, obviously I'm still here. I understand there's some people that get so suicidal and get so worked up and then their life just comes completely unraveled, but it's definitely like made me depressed before. And then you're just in this big funk and then you turn around and you live in the real world for a while, interact with like real people finally, and life seems a whole lot better.
Yeah.
'Cause you're kind of in a similar deal that I am. I mean, you're married now, and that's great because you have Helen, but there's a lot of what we do that's just like working by yourself. So if your life is working by yourself, maybe interacting with a handful of people, and then you're on social media all the time, seeing what everyone else has got going on and like all these friends we have all across the country and what they've got going on. And you get more focused on all these people who, it's not that we don't care about them, but if you're really looking at it from like a human perspective, it's like, why are these people that are hundreds and thousands of miles away having such an impact on me when I'm here, like should be present and living my life? And that's tough. And I think that's like, I think that's in the horse world and the Western community as a whole. Because you might be the only person in your town who is really in your line of work, or there's a handful of people and you get along with half of them or something like that, you know? And then you go to things like shows or clinics or the NFR, and then you meet people that you really get along with. And then you're like, well, it would feel good to stay focused on that person, right? Mm-hmm. It would feel good to stay focused on that person, even though you might not see him for like a year or 6 months. But really, all right, let's say social media didn't exist. You'd go back home and you'd have to make the most of what you had at home, which is probably a much more healthy perspective because you start living with the actual human beings around you. I mean, like even you and me, you and I know that when we do these in person, there's just some sort of X factor that makes them way better than when we do it from a couple 100 miles away.
Yeah. Well, but I think back to the responsibility of social media. Like I think what they were trying to get at with like Zuckerberg, and I think it's warranted, was the responsibility of how they manage the platform. And like you could equate it to like a good set of parents. You know, you're raising a kid, and you know how kids are very malleable. Their young brain can be bended and affected by the people that they're around. So you're not going to let your kid just hang out with hoodlums. You're going to try to get your kid to hang out with the people that you want them to be like, or even they might not even be people you want your kid to be like, but you're going to kind of vet the social, you know, surroundings of your kid for the most part, especially if they're going to be around adults. So, you know, you were talking about social media as if they're people that we hang out with like online, like you're watching their life. Well, now you've got your kid unleashed on social media, spending time with all these different characters, you know, it's not a real life setting, but it's still having a major impact on their life, maybe more so than if they were there in person, because they're just getting the filtered version. And then the platform itself is not moderating the content. The parents don't have any idea. So now your kids are growing up, and instead of like in the old fashioned sense, you could have some, you know, sense of control over who your kids spend their time with. Now you don't. And so, you know, that's every parent's got to decide how they're going to raise their kids. But I think that's what they were calling for with him, was like, hey, you built this thing, so where's the accountability? You know, if this algorithm, like, you know how it is, right? If you watch a bunch of buck off videos, you start getting more buck off videos. So like, however it works, Instagram knows what a horse buck off is. As weird as that is. Yeah. Like somehow it knows what those stupid like Argentine horse wreck videos are, and it will keep sending them to you. And so if they can recognize that, they can recognize all kinds of videos. And why isn't the platform, you know, diminishing the bad videos and promoting, you know, better, more edifying content for your kids? And maybe I'm making an argument against myself here. Maybe that's a good reason that we would be on TikTok, because at least, I mean, I think I know you, and I know I'm not going to put some bad thing out there. So, you know, we're adding good content, and it's kind of a platform that's here, whether we like it or not. But yeah, I think that's what they were calling for with him, was like responsibility of management. Now that you've built this thing, like, hey, our kids are being affected by what they're seeing on here. So yeah, you know, there's something to say for that, because like you were saying, it is really handy. It's a great tool. And there's many times where I see something on there that changes my whole day. And I'll think, gosh, I'm glad I saw that. Like if I hadn't have seen that, I almost feel like I'm poorer for it. That's not very often, but it does happen, where I'll see a little clip or I'll hear someone talk and I'll think, gosh, that's awesome. I want to be like that, or that's great advice. I don't know. Is that the healthy way to get it? I mean, maybe that's just like a little bit of candy and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Maybe it would be better to just read some books and get it out of there. But there's certainly good stuff that trickles down. And then there's the fun stuff, right? You'll send it to your buddies, and there's like the funny stuff that you want to share. And then there's the stuff that's just ridiculous. And you're like, who is wasting their life making this content? So it's a weird world, but I guess it's here to stay. And like, I'm not that old, but I feel like we didn't have that when I was a kid. Yeah. And it's definitely changing. It's changing. What's weird is you think it would change the next generation, but you see it changing adults, like all the way up to like grandparents. You see grandparents spending time on Instagram, and you see it change their behavior and their character a little bit. And it's certainly interesting. But I'm still a little wary of TikTok, so I don't think I'm going to download it and put it on my phone, but
you don't. I mean, it's an experiment for me.
No, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it.
Have you ever heard, like watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma?
No.
It's on Netflix, and it basically like, I think it was done by a couple of these guys who were at these big tech companies like a Facebook or a Twitter or something like that. And they left, and then they're like, we have to make this documentary. And it's basically, it shows you, at least at the time, it's a couple years old now, what the line of thinking was inside one of these big companies. And, you know, while I won't say it was malicious, the way they described it is, okay, say it's 150 years ago and you're a company. Maybe if we wanted to make a company 150 years ago, we would like get a bunch of cowboys and try to go graze cattle in like New Mexico somewhere, right? We'd try to go be like a McClintock or something like that. And like, that's what you would do. A lot of what the new frontier was developing these places, starting with agriculture, and then, you know, and then you could build a town there and you can build, and things could grow. Well, not that isn't still happening, but they said the new frontier is a person's time. Okay. How much of a consumer's time can you dominate? And all of these apps are competing for your time, right? That's why they all want to send you notifications. That's why they all want to make your phone light up, get excited and be like, oh boy, I want to see, you know, what so-and-so said about my picture I posted. And that is kind of how they define their market share. Like, as someone who works at Instagram, for example, how can I design Instagram to take up as much of Ben's 24-hour day as possible? And that might sound really scary, which it is, but like, doesn't it make sense that that's their objective? Because that's their bread and butter, is how much time do you spend on there? The more time you spend on there, the more valuable our application is when people pay us to run ads on it, right? No different than network television 30 years ago, you know, when we're the network that's going to have the Super Bowl. And then that means we're going to get X amount of views for X amount of time, and we're going to be able to sell ads for X amount of money. So their whole line of thinking is, how do we make more money? We take up as much of Ben's 24-hour day as possible. And until probably the last couple of years, there hasn't really been a conversation on like if there's any ethical dilemmas behind that. They'll show you whatever you want. You know, they'll show the 16-year-old kid like girl squatting in the gym for 4 hours, right? And he's like, wow, I like this, you know, and then that he does that instead of like anything productive. Or they show, you know, the teenage girl, all these makeup tutorials and like how she feels like society expects her to look. And, you know, they prey on like whatever human instinct they feel like they can prey on. They show Ben a bunch of Argentine buck off videos with guys with Bramer cattle running after him and all this crazy stuff. And Ben sits there and scrolls for 3 hours. And like, that is their whole objective. And it's a kind of a scary thought, but also you could like from a raw capitalist standpoint, you understand why that's their objective. So then it comes into, you have to define what's ethical and what's not within that objective.
Yeah.
And that's probably where, you know, if you're going to have some form of regulation, where that comes in, like how available are you going to make this to teenagers and kids younger than that? And, you know, what are you going to be allowed to show on there and not show on there and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in lieu of freedom, I don't know that they need to put laws on that necessarily. Right. I mean, you should be free to do what you want to. I think as an individual, the more that you learn how valuable your own time is, the more you would take that into question, how much time you spend looking at that stuff. Because if you didn't realize how valuable your time was, someone could tell you that. And if you were kind of addicted to social media, it wouldn't even matter anyway. But someone who realizes how valuable their time is, they're going to figure that out on their own. Right? I mean, they're just going to have better things to do.
Hey there, On the Move listener. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to stop and listen to our podcast. Whether you're a faithful listener or a first-time listener that likes what you hear, if you want to support us, there's a couple things you can do. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos on YouTube, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us and leave us reviews. Whatever medium you're listening on, if you can engage with the podcast on there by following, leaving positive reviews, and just generally helping spread the word about On the Move, it's a big help to us, and it helps us grow and bring you better episodes every week. Again, thanks for your support, and we'll see you guys.
But I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I don't know what it is. I think it's because TikTok is connected to China or something, but they're probably all, Yeah. Which one is TikTok? Are they like connected to another social media platform? Like I know how Instagram and Facebook they're essentially under the same company, right?
Instagram,
Meta.
yeah, they're all under Meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then YouTube is separate.
Yep.
Right. And then so TikTok is completely separate by itself.
Yeah, I think TikTok's its own entity.
Cool.
So
anyway,
we'll see. If if all my information is being used by the Chinese government, I'll try to let you know as soon as I know.
Hey, maybe we'll pick up more Chinese followers.
I'm trying to be a global brand anyway, man. So I'm fine with that.
I'm with you.
Hey, so something I don't know how up to date you are on all these messages we get.
Yeah.
Shout out to everyone listening. We do see your messages
there's
on
people listening
on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, I know, right?
It feels like it's us.
Well, we see your messages. We don't always get back to people because there are quite a few, and we don't have. I don't think we'd have time to get back to everybody, to tell you the truth. But we do see when you guys suggest people for the podcast, and we really appreciate that. And we've taken a lot of suggestions, actually, so we want people to keep doing that.
Yeah.
But a fun thing that came across that I thought maybe we'd address, if you guys have anything you want us to talk about, in terms of like questions you want answered or just our thoughts on a topic, go ahead and send those in. Probably Facebook or Instagram, DMing us or sending us an email. What's the email? It's like theonthemovepodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
Yeah. So we like getting those emails, and we like getting, thoughts from you guys on what to talk about. But this was someone who wrote into us on Facebook. This was, her name's Allie. Let me look at her whole profile here.
Are you just doing this on Messenger?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is, how do you think you pronounce that last name?
Oh, I've struggled with that one myself.
Brutke?
Yeah. It could be like Brute or Brutke.
So this is Allie from Amity, Oregon.
Allie, you know who you are.
And she's messaged us a couple times, which we appreciate. But her latest message, she had something we wanted to talk about. She said she'd love to hear our stance on blankets. She knows both of us currently live in the eastern United States, and the weather's a lot different than where she's at in Oregon. What do you do for blankets on your personal horses, client horses, whatever? Also, I like people getting worked up about the blanket debate. That she adds
like
that at the end.
We like that
Yeah.
Allie likes people to get worked up.
Yeah.
Because we like people to get worked up too.
We like
or
controversy.
we wouldn't
too.
have this podcast.
Yeah. So
Joe really likes people to get worked up because
Me?
we can do that next. But the comments on that reel you made,
oh yeah,
with
we'll
our
talk about
friend.
that next. We will talk about
I
that.
was like,
next.
Joe, that was good. All right. So you want to go first? To
Yeah.
Your thoughts.
So blankets. I live in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Pretty temperate climate, but there is quite a bit of moisture compared to places out west. As far as blanketing is concerned, I wouldn't consider myself staunch anti-blanketing. I think there's a lot of good reasons to blanket. For example, I know a lot of people fox hunt in the wintertime. And if you're going to fox hunt in a lot of places, it's really not fair to the horse to work them that hard where they're going to sweat that much and have them have their long shaggy coats. So people might do a trace clip or some sort of clip on them. And then that just helps them kind of air out and dry a lot faster after you've worked them that hard in the winter months. But I don't think you should clip a horse and then not blanket it because you did just take its natural ability to insulate itself. I'd say for 90% of our personal horses, we don't blanket. I do have one mare that's an off-track thoroughbred. And I think if I had to get by not blanketing her, I could. But since she's a thoroughbred, Betty, I have found that if I do put a kind of a medium blanket on her when it gets below freezing, because we had several days below freezing this winter, she tends to keep a weight on a lot better. Like I've had winters I didn't blanket her, and she got through, and she was still healthy, but she didn't keep her weight into the spring the way I would have liked her to. And then I did blanket her. And like right now, I think her weight looks great. So that's another thing. You know, if you have something that's like a thoroughbred or a really hard keeper, it might just pencil out instead of just feeding the living crap out of the thing to just blanket them. And then they're not shivering off all their calories they're taking in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also know there's a lot of people that blanket older horses, you know, and that's something you'd have to kind of make a call on. I feel like, cause I do think a lot of people keep horses maybe like one winter too long and the horse is doing rough and it's not looking good. But you know, you got a horse out there who's like, he's in good flesh and he's 25 years old and he's still chipper and, you know, bucks a little out in the pasture when it's like a warm spring day. And then you get a cold front roll in and you got to blanket him like 5 times a year. Yeah, maybe just if you got an old soldier like that, just blanket the horse and like let him be a little happier. And it's not going to be the end of the world. No one's going to take your cowboy card or anything like that. So that being said, like 90% of our horses, we don't blanket and they tend to get by all right. I'm a firm believer that if you can keep, kind of like what Sky Clark said, like if you can give them a bunch of hay, access to a bunch of hay and access to good water that keeps recirculating, whether that's like an automatic water or a creek or something, then I think you'll be all right with 90% of horses. But there are special cases, hard keepers or show horses or horses that you clip that, yeah, I don't think it would be fair to do anything but blanket them. You kind of just make them suffer otherwise. So,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say common sense. I mean, I know that's not an available commodity to everybody, but, you know, if you go back to the standard, you know, if a horse is healthy and well adjusted to its climate, and you're providing all the necessary nutrition, it should make it through every season. And then you just basically described it. There's so many variables of that. I don't have any personal horses that wear blankets, and none of our ranch horses here do. But yeah, if someone brings me a show horse that they keep in a barn and they keep him clipped, and he's going to live outside here and it's going to dip below freezing, I'm going to blanket him every night. And kind of mimic what a horse would be like naturally, right? Especially if they ask me. That's in my position. I don't have any horses that wear blankets, but if a client wants their horse to wear a blanket, now if it really seems unnecessary, then I'll, go to bat for the horse and talk to the client and say, hey, I really don't think it's necessary. And a lot of times, it's not, and they say, hey, no big deal, I just wanted to send it. I think you find a lot of times when you're dealing with clients, they'll send a blanket with their horse because it's kind of like an ethical thing. Like they look like a good person because they sent a blanket with their horse. And I always tell people like, hey, that's cool. Like you must take good care of your horse. Good job. But it's really not that cold here and your horse looks fine and he'll be better for it if he doesn't wear a blanket. But then there's other horses where they're clearly well-versed on how to take care of their own horse and they send a blanket with him and I use it. I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah.
And then like you said, old horses and whatnot, but
yeah, I
just kind of go off of that. If it was my personal horse, I would just think, am I missing something in his diet?
Yeah.
Or is he like immunocompromised in some way where I need to add a blanket? But for me, a lot of times it's going along with the client and just determining like, does he really need a blanket? And I wouldn't tell anybody to not do something a client asks, like without telling them. Like tell them it's all right to have the conversation. I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Where like the client will ask them to do something and then the client leaves and then they don't do it because they're like, they won't know about it. It's not a big deal. I'm a professional. Well, if you're such a great professional and you know best, you should talk with them because like 9 times out of 10, that client's more than happy to hear what you think and may even change their opinion. Or in my case, it's happened a lot of times where I may bring something up with the client like, hey, we don't need to use a blanket. And then they'll tell me something about the horse I didn't know. And then it turns out the horse does need a blanket. So, I'm kind of like you, just common sense and kind of depending on the horse. Yeah. And I would say like 80% of the time a horse doesn't need a blanket.
I would agree. And it's funny because like a lot of people, I don't know, there might be some people who are like real hard on men, like you don't need to put a blanket on a horse, and they're trying to be like real like gruff and cowboy about the whole deal. Man, if someone's really taking that strong of a stance on it, I bet you money they haven't been around a whole lot of horses.
And I've seen a horse colic and die because of that kind of activity.
Absolutely.
Where it's like the good old cowboy stance of like, he doesn't need a blanket. He needs to toughen up. I mean, that's kind of like telling someone with pneumonia, like, just go outside without your shirt on. You'll just toughen up. You'll be fine. It's like, no, maybe he shouldn't do that. Just toughening up is not always the answer.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with Betty is she's never colic, but she's had some, like she'll come in and kind of be like shivering, like there's like a big temperature change. Because that is one thing that's really difficult about blankets, at least where I live. Like I've been around some barns. I would say the common practice where I live is if you work at a boarding barn or like a collegiate barn or something like that, it's like, hey, this horse has 2 blankets. It's got a medium blanket and a heavy blanket. And like right there next to the horse's info, it's like if the low dips under 35 degrees, put this medium on. If the low is under 25 degrees, put this heavy on. And yeah, like that's a good thought. It's like, well, it's going to be this cold. The problem you run into where I'm at least is, say they do like, say everyone feeds early that day and it could still be like 55 degrees. You turn a horse out in a blanket and it's going to be 29 at 6 a.m. Right. And you kind of have to use some common sense. It's like, this horse might have to grit it out for like the hour or 2 before I get to the barn. But, I'll have people, they're like, well, I just checked the low on my phone and then turned them out. And it's like this beautiful day out still, and the horse is like, you can see it like sweating in the pasture. So that is one thing that has like not deterred me, because I just explained my stance on blankets, but people don't implement it properly. And then the other way, like you just said, you can have people who are like, well, we don't need to blanket them no matter what. It's like, well, if you got a more sensitive horse, like what I've got, a thoroughbred, she's a little more sensitive to these huge swings we have in our climate, where it's like, you know, we've gotten to the point, this winter, it was 65 degrees, and 30 hours later, it was 9 degrees. And, you know, maybe you do have some just tough old ranch horses, and they're going to be fine. But if you've got one that you know is kind of more susceptible to that sort of thing,
Yeah.
just be smart and blanket the damn horse. And it's like, you know, don't worry about your freaking ego trying to be a cowboy or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I can't speak for a lot of people, but I think some people pose this would be strictly from like the hardcore cowboy stance, like the whole blanket thing. It's almost like, you know, do you like a snaffle bit or a curb bit or something?
Yeah.
And it's not in that territory.
Yeah.
It's
it's not 1 or 0.
It's not 1 or 0.
Yeah.
It's a feel thing.
Yeah.
And it's depending on the situation. So,
100%.
I guess that's how we feel.
And I know some people that I would consider real, like, tough, punchy cowboys, and they probably have a horse or two that they blanket, or their wife blankets, or whatever, you know, whatever. And you know what? The horse gets along great, and the horse probably feels good about that person and how they're being taken care of. And that's a good thing.
Yep. Well, and some of those people too, that are great horsemen in their own right and real punchy, and they'll say, I don't ever use blankets. And if you got to talking to them, you'd probably find out they've gotten rid of a couple horses that needed a blanket, because they just don't like blankets.
Right.
They're not saying there's no horse that needs a blanket. They're saying none of my horses will ever wear a blanket.
Right.
And if one does, this is what they don't tell you. If one does, they're going to sell it.
Yeah.
Because they're just not into doing that, which is totally fine. I understand that.
Mhm.
I mean, really, if I had my own way, I don't think I would want a horse in my string that needed a blanket.
I wouldn't. I have a horse in my string that needs to be blanketed. And
Yeah.
if I could snap my fingers tomorrow and not have any horses that need to be blanketed, I would make it that way.
Yeah.
Because it drives me
so
nuts.
much easier.
Yeah. It's another thing.
Yeah.
And that's no different than just, you know, like Ben and I love horses. That should be really obvious by now, but it's no different than like having a cull cow, right? Like if you're like building a herd of cattle, you have like your prototype that you're trying to aspire to. And it's like, well, we had this, you know, heifer, or we got this, you know, 4-year-old, and she's had a couple calves, but every time it's just like it's a struggle, and she never really like bonds with it. And we got to get her up and get her, you know, and it's just like, you know, you got a couple tries, and then you know, you're a cow, and that's fine, but you're not what I'm looking for my program. And with the horses, you know, it's not like we send them off to the local stock market sale, but we will probably find them a home that is fitting for them and not have them be a part of our program.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, like I said, if I could snap my fingers tomorrow and never had to put another blanket on a horse, I'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to let that be the reason I don't blanket a horse that needs it.
Yeah. Well, and like you're kind of bringing up the whole issue of, I don't even know what you'd call it, but it's like this inclusivity thing where like people, like they probably feel the same way that we do. Like they would like horses to not need a blanket. They would like to have healthy horses.
Mm-hmm.
But if some random horse comes along, they're going to try to accommodate them as much as possible. And that's great. Like they love horses. We would do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like a healthy horse that can withstand the cold and not need a coat is a much happier horse than this horse that you like drag from season to season.
Yeah.
Give him all kind of like medications and coats and different kinds of food and different kinds of like boots on his feet and all this stuff. Like somebody sent me I'll show it to you. I don't think we can show it to them. Someone sent me a message today while we were roping down there.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got this horse and they were wondering if I could take it. And I didn't respond yet. And I was going to tell them Yeah, look at this photo. You can swipe left and right, and then you can look at their message. We don't need to read that message because it's not from the On the Move thing. But basically, like that kind of deal. So, guys, basically, it's a horse. It looks really rough, okay? Like really rough. And, like, yeah, it's the kind of, you see it, and you're like, that's really sad. Like, I feel really bad for that horse. But, no, I'm not going to go get that horse. And you know what? The kindest thing you could do for that horse is humanely put it down at this point. And at least, like, for me, where I'm at in my life, I can, like, take care of good horses. I have nice horses to take care of right now. I want to keep doing that. And like I just said, like a healthy horse, like strong, robust horse is the most happy horse.
Yep.
So if more like healthy horses are going to go into demise because I'm wasting a ton of effort and money on a horse like that, it's just counterproductive. Like, it seems to some people like that would be neglectful or like mean, but really that's the kindest thing you can do. It's like a horse that is that far gone. It's got some injuries. It just looks really rough. It's been, like, I don't know if it's anyone's fault. It could just, think about it. There's feral horses that end up dying of old age, and I bet it's not pretty. So when a horse is like that, you humanely put that horse down. That's the best thing you can do for that horse. And then you can focus your other attention and resources and effort on a nice horse that's already happy and healthy.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like a horse like that, what you just showed me, where he's underfed, had some injuries,
Hey, On the Move listener. Have you been following us on social media? Have you been watching the video format of the podcasts? If so, you've probably noticed by now that we have On the Move merch. I'm wearing one of our hats right now. The first order of hats we did flew off the shelves, and we've only got a handful left in each style. But we're doing another order, and if you want to pre-order your On the Move hat today, go to www.onthemovepodcast.com. There you'll find our Shopify store with hats, mugs, stickers, and other merch. Get it just in time for the holiday season and let everyone know that you're on the move.
You know, I can appreciate anyone who spends the time to bring something like that back around. But a very utilitarian way to look at it is you could spend the same amount of time and resources getting that horse back to kind of fighting shape, you know, and you could get like 3 or 4 good horses in a good spot with that same amount of time and effort.
Yep.
And
again, like, don't forget about that horse you're trying to help. In the end, he may not even feel that much better. Like, he'll, I think, I mean, look, now we're getting touchy feely, but the horse is probably going to recognize you're trying to help him and he's going to appreciate it. But really, like, that horse is going to have some chronic issues for the rest of his life. He's going to be uncomfortable. Oh, God forbid you try to start riding him. He's probably got back issues. So, like, you're just not doing him any good.
Yeah.
I mean, you are doing him good, but like in the long run, you know what it reminds me of? I think Steve Rinella told this story one time, but he was talking about like bringing back animals in different areas. And he was talking about bringing back mountain lions in Maine. And someone had proposed to bring back mountain lions to thin down the deer population because they were having a lot of car accidents. And look, I don't know the stats. Someone could look up the story. I'm terrible at Googling. You guys already saw that. So I'm just going to try to remember it. But it was something like 200 kids were dying in car accidents because of hitting deer in Maine. Let's say it was 2007, you know, it was a while ago. And that's pretty plausible. Like kids riding with their parents, hitting deer. This is Maine. There's a lot of deer and moose and stuff like that. Let's just say it was like 200 kids dying of car accidents because of hitting deer on the highways. So they were going to bring back mountain lions to thin down the deer population. Well, I don't know if they brought them back or they did the statistics, but either way, something like 5 to 7 kids were going to get killed by mountain lions every year. So people freaked out, but little did they know it was going to thin the deer population so much that you were going to bring down like child mortality by about half. So you were actually going to gain like
an extra
94 kids every year.
Yeah.
But people were so worried about the 5 kids dying from mountain lion attacks And that's like a classic example of, missing the forest for the trees.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so it's the same with that horse. It's like you want to save that one horse. And I think we're just privileged to be in that position where we see that kind of stuff enough. And you just mentioned the cull cow herd. You see that and you go, they ought to put that horse down.
Yeah.
Humanely take care of that and move on with your life. And other people don't see it that way.
Yeah.
But I totally appreciate where they're coming from. And I hope they can appreciate where I'm coming from. I think we both want the same thing, but just life experience. And you learn to do the numbers, right? Like whether you're a horse trainer or you're a rancher or you're a carpenter, like some of these trades where it's all about numbers and quantity and, you're putting in work for a certain amount of hours to get paid a certain amount. Like you just learn to think that way. And when you see something like that, the numbers crunch and you go, you ought to probably put that horse down and move on with your life. And that's the kindest thing you can do and the smartest thing for yourself. At least that's how it hits me.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would agree. So it's funny you brought up Steven Rinella because when you showed me that, I thought of a different Steven Rinella story. Kind of pertains to the same thing. And he, him being like a hunting guy, he talks about this quite a bit because I think it's just how hunters perceive things. But he talks about it was, someone who's like anti-hunting talking to a pro hunter, and they're like, well, I just can't see how you would shoot a deer. Like I love that deer. And then the hunter was like, well, I love deer too. But they defined it differently. Like the hunter was like, I love that deer, but I love all deer. Like I love the idea of deer, and this could be any species, but that's what they were talking about. I love that deer. I want the deer that exists to be strong and healthy and happy, and us to have wherever they were, like a big, robust deer population. And that's kind of how I feel like our foot just touched each other under the table. That was pretty fucking weird.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway.
Yeah, I moved my foot.
Yeah, dude, you just touched my foot with your foot. That was...
At least I'm being protected by those New Balances.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
Wow. We were really serious and then became really not serious.
We need a bigger table.
Yeah, we definitely
Let's go back
need
to
a
doing
bigger
these things
table.
online.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now I want the couple 100 miles between us because I didn't like that at all. So it's like with the horses, like, are there individual horses I love? Yes. And like, I feel love for every horse, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way, but it's like, you also have to kind of have this idea of like love for the horse as a whole, like a whole population, right? So like if we as Americans, because that's where we live, and it'd be the same if we lived in Argentina or Australia or whatever, like if we as Americans wanted to be like, yeah, where I live, there is a happy, healthy, strong population of horses. Okay. Well, that means you have to be kind of calculating, and we only have a set amount of resources, and there's a lot of rescues out there that they do good work. But, if I had to open a rescue tomorrow, I would try to be really smart about looking at a horse and like, is that a horse that just, we can save, or is that a horse that's going to be a project for the rest of its life? And you're really not going to have that much improvement in that horse's life. And that doesn't mean I don't care about that horse. Okay. I do care about that horse, but I also care about every other horse, and we've got to figure out, you got to be realistic, and you can't save them all.
Yeah.
You just can't. And
And,
You know,
and it's not just all the living horses, right? It's like the future. So
Exactly.
maybe you're involved in actually trying to breed better horses, or you're like, we've
Right.
talked with people, right? We've talked about all kinds of issues and how to fix them. And it's never really about like a particular horse. It's about like seeing it so much broader.
Yep.
And like, where's it all going? And what
Exactly.
part are you playing in that? Maybe you don't need to play an integral part, but maybe you shouldn't drag your feet either, because that doesn't help anybody.
Because you know where, at least where I'm at and what I've seen with the rescues around me, half of these rescue horses end up there because there's somebody who's an irresponsible horse owner and just breeds a bunch of these damn things.
Yep.
And then has nothing, like, does not have the means to take care of them. They're junky horses, so no one wants to buy them. And then they become emaciated, and then they end up on some government list, and then a rescue ends up taking a bunch of them, spending all this time like trying to help these junky horses. And it's like, well, who was the person that created this problem in the first place? You know? And I bet that person would claim, well, I love horses. It's like, yeah, well, you just created a bunch of them and then gave them a really raw deal.
Yeah.
So think about that. Because I'm sure there's probably going to be at least one person lately, whenever we do anything controversial, there's a pile of people. They come at us and they're like, you know, they're like, you're wrong because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, well, who's rougher on horses? Me or the person who brings a bunch of horses into this world and then doesn't have the means to take care of them and then dumps them on a rescue that could otherwise be helping some good horses that maybe just found some hard luck because like an owner died or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's our stance on
Yeah.
blankets.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. You wanna run through a few more of these? We got a bunch of. We could just hit on some stuff.
Yeah, that's
We've
fine
got-
with me.
There's some pretty entertaining ones in here too.
Well,
They're
we
not
could-
even questions, but they're
Yeah, a lot of you guys send in stuff like it's not even a question. It's just you feel so strongly like, and I don't want to make fun of our listeners because I do appreciate when people share their opinions. We've met a lot of cool people through this deal, and we've learned a lot of cool stuff. But there's some people that write in, and you think it's like it's building to something, and then it doesn't. It's like they've
Yeah.
said their piece, and then
Yeah.
that was it.
well, it's like here's a good example right here. And like Joe said, yeah, of course we appreciate our listeners, and we're really highlighting these because we do appreciate you guys. But like, here's a cool message from a guy named Terry, and Terry said, "Hi, for your interviews, are they always like 1 hour long? Thanks for your time." I don't know, Terry. I would say scroll down the length of our interviews, and I think any platform you listen on, it gives you a little time indicator, and it will tell you that most of our interviews are close to 90 minutes long. So
Yeah.
there you go. That may help you, or that may help somebody else. But when you're a professional podcaster like we are, that's one of the kind of questions you could get. All right, come on, Joe, hit us with a good one.
All right. Well, okay. One thing you mentioned talking about was all the I don't know if it's hate mail, but all the controversial
Oh, back to
topics we got after Travis's
yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
So
Are you there?
yeah,
Where
I'm
are these
on
at?
it.
Are they on that?
They're on Instagram, and then
Okay.
they're on Facebook too, and it's from the clips we shared.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there who haven't listened, that this is episode 85 with Travis Burns. Travis Burns is probably one of the most educated equine podiatrists I've ever been around. Really knows a lot about horses' feet and how to fix problems. And Ben, one of the things we've asked a lot of our guests, you know, if they're an expert on a topic, is, you know, if you had a magic wand, that is one of my favorite questions, the magic wand question. If you had the magic wand and you were dictator of the world, what's one change you would make, you know, in your industry, your area of expertise, and how would that change things? So Travis said he would, as an equine podiatrist and farrier, he would ban horseshoes in all disciplines and competitions. Okay. And a lot of people just saw that clip that we posted. From what I can tell, they didn't feel the need to listen to the whole episode. I guess the 30-second clip was enough for them to understand his take. But at least what I gathered from Travis saying that was that he felt like in sport, so like horses in competition, if you ban horseshoes, all of a sudden you wouldn't have all these, you know, horses that are winning whatever it is that they're competing in, but they have crappy feet. And I hate to pick on them because I like thoroughbreds. Just talked about how I owned a thoroughbred, and I like thoroughbred racing. I think it's really fun. It's a cool industry. But the classic example is thoroughbreds having crappy feet, but they're just bred to run faster. So it's like, as long as they can run fast and be sound till they're like 4 years old, then, you know, their feet can be terrible the rest of their lives and it doesn't matter. And then if they were fast, you'll probably breed them and make more colts with bad feet. Which he's 100% right, in my opinion, you know. Now what he didn't say was, I think someone who is a rancher in the Bighorn Mountains who has to do a 20-mile circle every day on his horses should not be allowed to put steel shoes on his horse. That is not what he said. There are a lot of reasons to still put shoes on horses. He was saying for competition purposes, where 9 times out of 10, you're on some sort of groomed surface, where nowadays we have the technology for the horses to be barefoot and sound on those surfaces, whether it be a racetrack or a jumping arena or a show pen for the NRHA, whatever it is. And that was just his opinion. But wowee, did people not like him saying that?
Yeah, because we did. We stood up for the ranchers. We stood up for the guys who needed shoes.
Mhm.
We've all seen like granola horse feet that are just like being held together by like shoes and all kinds of stuff. You know, they epoxy.
Yep.
I'm not even around enough of those kinds of horses, but I know the look.
Yep.
And they're always worried about the feet. And they're like, oh, if that thing comes off or if it doesn't get done right, it's going to crumble. You hear that? It's going to crumble. Like, how awful is that? Like, I have a horse, his feet are going to crumble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good look.
Totally shouldn't be in competition. But no, it's kind of fun, though, to watch people. It's fun to watch the hate mail a little bit. I don't read a lot of comments, but I'm kind of like, you know, there's like the hardcore rhetoric of like, don't ever read your comments. And then there's the guys who are like, the comments, the hate fuels me. I'm neither of those, but it is a little interesting to get a little hate mail. I don't even think we've had hate mail. I would say we've had disgruntled, contrary comments.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good little comment. I'll shout out this guy. It's not a question. It's not an answer. It's not even hate mail. But it's the kind of message we get a lot. This is from a guy named Dawson Foley. And I think this is cool. I think I don't really know who our listeners are, but I imagine a lot of people like this. He said, hey, I apologize. I didn't think to DM you guys at first. Thanks for the response. But yes, I am just now getting into this line of work and I really enjoy it. I'm from North Carolina and I didn't grow up really around this culture. I worked for an outfitter this fall packing mules and taking hunters out to camp. I wanted to become a better horseman, and I'd like to say I'm just curious if you guys have any advice on where to get started. Maybe it's something you guys could mention in an episode. I'm very interested in starting colts, horse training, and all aspects. I've even started reading up on Buck Brannaman. I know this is a lifelong journey, and I am interested in all aspects of ranching and horsemanship. It's cool every time you see those kind of messages because I see myself 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's me. You know, a guy who, well, totally different subject, but it goes along with this. You know, we lost. Now I can't even remember. That's
Cap?
awful, dude. I can't even remember his name.
Cap.
I've been thinking about it all day. No, we
Rawhide?
dude, I'm probably just tired or something.
What are you? You're talking about a
But
horse?
no, I'm talking about a person. I'm talking
Oh,
about
Toby
a country
Keith.
singer. We lost Toby Keith.
Toby Keith.
And that song Should Have Been a Cowboy.
Yeah.
You know, that's like go west, young man. Every young guy's dream. But I remember feeling the same way. You want to get into horsemanship. You just hear that in your mind. Should have been a cowboy. But you're young enough that you don't have to say should have been a cowboy. You can go be a cowboy. And so here's a guy trying to start out, trying to figure out what to do, and he's listening to the podcast. So good luck. I mean, there is a question in there. He said, maybe you guys could mention it in an episode, you know, how to get started and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know what you would say, Joe. I would just tell anybody get started is like get started.
Yeah.
And I know that's super broad, but from the different people we've interviewed, that's some great advice. I'm sure Joe and I, if we met you, and even without meeting you, just talking like this, we could probably give you some sort of direction on how to get started. But if you go back and listen to some episodes, like listen to, I mean, now these guys got a great ride, but you listen to like Joe Wolter's episode, you listen to Buck's episodes, you listen to Brian Newbert, you listen to some of these guys that
you know who else had a really
great start. Joel Connor would be a good guy to listen to.
Joel Connor. I thought it was cool to hear because we just went into it with him a little more. Brad Cameron.
Yeah.
He was talking about, you know, kind of in the early days of the clinic, and
Absolutely.
he was like, yeah, you just drove around the country in your stock trailer, and you had a beer and a can of Beanie Weenies. Like that, when he said that like stuck with me.
Yeah.
Just like his dedication. And he was like, at the very beginning, I didn't even know if I'd make money at this. Yeah. Like I'd just been doing it a couple years, and that was a guy who, you know, he's not a clinician anymore, but had like a healthy clinician career.
Yeah.
And then went on to be a rancher, and now is a really good maker. And yeah, like he's had a bunch of different things. Like he's tried his hand at a bunch of different things. And you know what? That's the type of guy, and all those guys you mentioned too.
Yeah.
They just started.
Yeah.
And
another great one from Wes Ferrazzi.
Wes Ferrazzi.
He had some good stories.
Yeah. Wes Ferrazzi was a great interview too.
About getting started. But like you just said, you just have to start. But, you know, in this age, we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, social media is like so handy. You can go on there, you can find jobs, you can find all kinds of things. But I think what you find with a lot of the guys we've interviewed is they saw what they wanted to do, and it might not have been that specific, but they had a general idea. So before they even went and got a job or work with somebody, they started practicing. They started thinking about it. They started reading, especially Wes. Like you listen to him and he talked about being a kid at home, just riding horses, studying tapes and trying stuff out. And I mean, that's something I can attest to. And I'm getting started myself, but like early on, before I could, you know, hang a shingle and say, hey, I can train horses, or I can, you know, come help you run your ranch or whatever. I mean, I remember just studying stuff. I'd read books. I'd read a ton. I remember, like when I was like a teenager, riding around on a bicycle, swinging a lasso rope, you know, doing all kind of stuff. There's lots of ways. I mean, if you can't order a rope in the mail and set up a rope and dummy on a hay bale or like an old little seesaw or what do you call that thing? Like a
sawhorse.
A sawhorse.
Yep.
Make yourself a rope and dummy. Start learning how to rope. Yeah. Read some books. Just
watch.
There's
like
tons of areas where you can practice,
so
no matter
much
where you are in the country.
Tape
you can
out
start
right now.
Practicing some stuff at home.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I feel the same way. Like when I started and got around all this horsemanship stuff, I had one horse, you know, and like poor that horse. I mean, it's still Betty who I was riding today. Right. And you've seen her basically since I've owned her, like different horse now.
Getting a lot. Yeah. Looking a lot different.
Yeah. But, but even though I had one horse, there was so much other stuff I felt like I could be doing to prepare myself for this dream I had. And like you said, studying is a big part of it. You know, just getting used to a rope, getting, you know, being able to like haul a horse. Like some people, it's a big deal to be able to hook up a trailer and like haul somewhere. You know, there's just all these little things. And so if you really have this dream, you need to really think about what can you control, and you need to be controlling that right now.
Yeah.
And from there, it's kind of like what, when we had Nick on here, he was like, I just felt like I was always preparing for what I wanted to do in any way I could. Then when I got my opportunity, I was prepared and I went for it.
Yeah.
And so that to me is what all those guys had, was they were willing to try things and they were willing to go and just start. But starting means being diligent about what you can control and just starting there. And then for all those guys, it was like the floodgates opened once they just started turning their hand and working at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing too is, just like we're getting started, you know, you may get good at something and start to become established, but most likely you're always going to be getting started at something. So that being said, you have to take time. I mean, this is something that I struggle with more, is taking the time to reflect on where you are and reflect on what you have accomplished, you know, because you have to do that. You have to look back, see yourself 5 years ago and go, wow, you know, I've actually come a little ways and I'm doing good. I'm doing a good job. You have to appreciate that. And then go ahead and look 5 years ahead. And then you realize you're also getting started. And, you know, most of those guys we're talking about, and quite a few examples in my life today, I mean, these are guys in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They're getting started at stuff that, you know, they're already established in other careers. Now they're getting started at other things. And at some points, they're as lost as you know, this fella Dawson is, where they're like, I don't know how to get started at this, but they have enough experience from having done all these other things that they're not really wondering. They might be wondering what to do as the next step, but they're moving, but they're still getting started. And so, you know, if you're young and you're getting started, that's not a bad place to be. You know, it's great that you're reaching out or you're asking for people's advice, but everyone's getting started at something new if you're on the move. And so, you know, you listen to any of those guys, it's neat. Like a lot of those guys we've interviewed, they have all this stuff they've done. So it was fun to talk about that, but they all had new projects or like new life changes that they were starting to go into, and they were just working their way through it. Like, yeah, I don't really know how it's going to go, but we're going to see, and we're just seeing how this goes. And, you know, I'm excited, and I've been practicing this, and it ought to go well. And that's what we're going to do. So it's like at every stage in life, everybody's getting started. And so depending on if you're the kind of person that sits on your laurels and kind of admires your, you know, your accomplishments, maybe you need to look forward a little bit more. But for some of us, we look forward so much that we have to kind of look back and appreciate how far we have come and kind of recognize that we are making change in our lives.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll miss the whole point of life.
Yeah.
You won't be able to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then what's really sad is maybe you'll get to the end of your life, and then all of a sudden it'll catch up with you that life was supposed to be enjoyed in the moment, and you never did. You were just looking at what's next. Yeah. And I don't think I realized that yet, but I remember you said this a long time ago. You're like, well, self-awareness is half the battle. Well, I'm glad I'm aware of it, but I don't think I really realized that. But gosh, I would be really sad for somebody that didn't even, you know, realize that and then get to the end of their life and realize it then. So if you're young, it's a good time to realize that. I think that the journey that's the best part, man. If you're getting started, like, that's awesome. And
which we talk about it through like rose-colored glasses because we're sitting here having a glass of bourbon with the microphone.
More of that bourbon too.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's real
Let's
easy
keep that.
for
People need to buy these. So.
oh yeah. It's real easy for us to sit here and talk about it. But holy crap, it's a lot harder than what we think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say control everything you can control, even if it's just watching, DVDs of whoever you like for 3 hours a night each night to start with.
Yeah.
Right. And just like committing, even if you don't have all the stuff in your muscle memory, just like committing all the words to memory.
Yeah.
And then from there, looking for opportunity.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some rose colored glasses going on. Like today, for instance, I've ridden a horse in a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
And when I sat on Cindy today, like, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but like, you guys were in the clinic and I was kind of late and I saddled up but man, just being on a horse and riding into the arena, like I felt like a little kid on Christmas morning. Yeah. And I don't feel like that every day. Yeah. I don't. I mean, there are days where I dread talking to clients. I dread the next horse. I dread going out in the rain, dread getting up in the morning. I mean, I'm like anyone else. Like I really just would like to sleep in sometimes, or I'd like to go shoot skeet or go ice skating or go look at my phone or whatever. But I think I have the right to say this, that I have found something that I love doing. And I know that because there are moments. It is not every day. It's not every day that I get up and ride horses. I'm like, this is the best thing on earth. I love this. I'll kind of tell myself that, and I'd tell anybody else that, but that doesn't mean a hell of a lot unless you feel it. And I do feel it sometimes. And like I felt it today. And when you feel that and you swing on a horse and you're riding into the arena and you know that you do that for a living and you're riding your horse and you're in your saddle and you have a feeling like that, there is nothing more reassuring than that, that you're doing what you love and you know it. Like you can feel it down into your guts. Like you cannot hold back a smile. And that is a very rewarding feeling, and you don't feel it every day.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet someone that has the perfect job and have them say they feel it every day. I don't think anyone does feel it every single day, every moment, but I think you feel it in little moments, and those little moments are well worth it. Yeah. And I remember that from today. Those little moments, I probably can almost count those moments on my hands over the last, 8 years or so. And I can almost remember every one of them when they happened. And it's the best feeling on earth. So.
Yeah. I had the thought today, and you kind of touched on it. You were talking about like our growth and stuff like that. Like, man, think about when we first met. It was pretty close to this time of year, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, imagine us back then. Like, we were roping a day, and we just like head and heeled a yearling, and like didn't even think about it too much, and we just did it, right? And that would not have been us 4 years ago. At least definitely not me. I mean, you've always been a more proficient roper than I have been, because you've gotten a lot more experience with like who you've been around. But like that was pretty cool. Like I had that thought. There was a couple times today, but especially that last time, we worked. I got that horse tied off, and got back on. Looked at you, and I was like, "Wow, this is pretty cool." Like, we looked at each other, popped our dallies. I was like, I've been looking at Ben a lot today. And 4 years ago, neither of us were near as handy as we are now. And I'm not saying we're super handy. So like ease off on that, because we get hate mail about that too. Like, you guys think you're so hot. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's just, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That we've grown that much. Like, talk about like taking time to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like, that was something cool from today, that we've grown that much, and we can do that now. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't really like, there used to be a time, like anytime my rope came tight, my like heart raced.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that won't ever happen again, because you never know what situation you might get in. You know, you might get some Buster McCleary stuff down the road. But at least the setting we were in today, I was like, no, this is good. And I was on like a, you know, Betty, she's not the handiest horse in the world, not the best horse in the world, but I mean, that horse is a soldier. Like, she kind of just hangs with you
Yeah.
through whatever.
Yeah.
I think one point you referred to her as like, she's like your dirt bike Joe.
Yeah.
Like, and she is. Like, I love that horse to death.
Yeah.
And, you know, the next, 20 horses I ride might be, if I like ride them as long as I ride her, they might be better. But that horse will like give you its heart and soul. And so like being on a horse like that and being able to rope, and you're like, well, I'm never worried. Like, things might go sideways, but my horse isn't going to sell out on me. I know that. And that's like a good feeling. So, and I never used to feel like that. I was always worried about whatever I was sitting on and how it was going to, come unglued.
Yeah.
So, I think we should appreciate that. Not that we're always patting ourselves on the back, but that was a cool moment today. I did have that thought.
Hey guys, let's talk about steel buildings for a minute. Maybe you've looked into making one, building one on your place. Maybe you saw the price tag and that scared you off. Maybe just the sheer amount of work and effort, planning, all that good stuff that goes into it has kept you from going ahead and building on your property. Well, now's a great time to get a free quote from a great company. Head over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move. And our friends at Metal Material Direct have a free online configurator. You can plug in all your details, dimensions, specifications, colors, windows, dormers, all kind of cool stuff. And you can see the building and get a free quote. If you head over there now and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you, you can get a massive discount on your building. And we're talking American steel. This is top quality stuff, guys, and a great company. They also offer fencing, a really cool fencing solution. It's a octagon pipe with bolt together connectors. So don't miss out on this. If you have wanted to build, need a building, or building fence, building an arena, just anything ranch, farm, or commercial related, head on over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you. Yeah, along with that, I feel like the other thing you get better at is just kind of laughing at yourself and learning.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because early on, you're so intent on being proficient, being like the guys that you look up to. I don't even know that you're learning half the time. It's almost like a vendetta against yourself. You're like, you son of a bitch, come on, rope it, And, but as you get more settled with yourself in the arena, like the calf before that calf, you remember, I think I threw my rope at that calf probably 15 times. And guys, like, this calf wasn't even hardly moving anywhere.
I got a lot of video of you, by the
way. And,
missing.
I think like that kind of thing. And I made a little joke at the end. I told Bill, because you know how when you're trying to rope a calf forever and then you finally get it, especially in a clinic setting, and everyone goes, woohoo, and it was like, that felt less like a victory, more like an ass kicking that took a long time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like. But at the same time, like if you're a student and you're trying to learn, like there's nothing wrong with that. You're just calibrating, you're learning, you're having a good time. You're not going to get good without doing that. And I think early on, you beat yourself up so hard. You miss and you're like, you son of a buck. How come you can't get that? But as time goes on, aside from getting better, you also learn that when you miss, it is not the end of the world. Mm-hmm. It's good. You're getting feedback on where you're at. You're getting feedback on how your rope is and where that calf is. And you're just getting some feedback on where things are at. So don't settle for that, clearly. But but don't beat yourself up. Just keep roping, keep smiling. That's fun. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still roping, you're still riding, you're just missing. And, you know, if roping was catching, they would have called it catching. It's not, it's roping. And so, like, it's weird, but there was a time, I don't know, like, you didn't get to work with me much. Like, I would see you at events, but there was a time, like, that back when I first met you, if we were out doing a job, if I missed 3 times in a row, I was starting to cuss. I was getting pissed. My horse probably didn't like me very much. Yeah. Like, I would really get pissed.
Yeah.
Like, as if that was going to help. And that's something I see different in myself a lot, is that it's all right to miss. It's kind of fun. It's okay. You know, there's no hurry. It's just you getting better. So all you have to do is keep throwing. You just have to keep doing it. And anyone who's really good at something, maybe they have a natural ability and they didn't miss as much. Or maybe they missed a bunch, but if they're really good now, they went through something to get there. And so if they had quit back when they were bad, they wouldn't ever be good. And I think that's something that you also have to appreciate, is as you get better, there's always something that you haven't done that you're going to be really bad at. And so it's like you don't just get better at the thing you're working at, but you get better at learning new things. And again, I'm not perfect, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed missing a little bit. It was fun.
Yeah.
Because it's just where you're at.
Yeah.
And you're on a horse, man. Any day on a horse is a good day.
Yeah.
I think Buck said that one time. Any day roping on a horse beats raking.
Yeah.
And man, I hate raking. Sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks eggs. So
yeah, no kidding.
I love roping.
I mean, it is one of those things, like, you just got to learn to take a breath and be uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's when you're growing. Because, how you wouldn't grow is just, catch everything. And like in the setting we were in today, like it's like a clinic roping setting. So it's not the end all be all. It's not like what quote unquote real life is like, right? But there's still room for you to like grow there and be uncomfortable and stretch yourself, because you were taking shots that were, harder for you. Like, that's what I was doing. I wasn't working on the stuff that I knew I was good at. I was trying to be like, well, we're here in this pen and it's pretty low stakes and we can afford to just miss and miss and miss if we need to, Yeah. Yeah. So I totally agree, man. You got to just be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We got any more comments on here that are worth looking at?
I think I've got one more.
All right.
And maybe we'll end it with this one.
Yeah.
So this is a guy, it's not so much a comment, but this guy's name is Reese Yoder. He really likes the podcast. He says Buck Brannaman's been a big influence in his life, so that's great. And he likes that he mentions that we talk about being able to surround yourself with like-minded people. And his biggest thing was that he is from northern Indiana. And so there's not a lot of the horsemanship or this way of thinking around him. And he was wondering if we could connect him with anybody. And, I don't know a whole lot about Indiana or the Midwest in general. But one thought I did have with all that was, I know Jon Stewart is from Indiana. So if you've listened to the Jon Stewart episode, Reese, he's from Indiana. And I do think if there's anyone who could connect you, it would be Jon. And he's pretty easy to find. He's pretty prominent on social media, has his own podcast, all that sort of stuff. So Reese, if you're listening, that would be my advice, was maybe listen to the Jon Stewart episode. And then after you're done listening to the Jon Stewart episode, reach out to him. And maybe he's the guy to kind of hook you up in Indiana and thereabouts, because he probably knows way more about the Midwest than we do. So that would be my 2 cents on the deal. I don't know what you would think.
I think that's that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
steers
I
me in
mean,
the
when
right
I think
direction.
Indiana, John Stewart's the only guy I think about.
Yeah.
So,
No, same here.
and I don't think he would mind us saying that at all. So,
No, not a bit. No, by the way, yeah, John, if you're listening, dude, your podcast is a lot of fun. I can't, I'll be honest, I haven't listened to a full episode, but your clips are pretty funny.
yeah,
You and your wife.
you're killing it on social media, Joe.
Yeah, you're probably one of the strongest couples out there so far. I don't know how many episodes you have under your belt, but I imagine a husband and wife podcast about real life stuff.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself out there, John.
When are we going to get your wife on the podcast, Ben?
I don't know. I have to talk to her about that.
Yeah.
She would probably be up for doing like a foursome podcast, like me, you, Kaylee, and her.
I was thinking
That would be
the
fun
same thing.
sometime. And they can like tell us how they really feel about us.
And the podcast. I don't know about you, but I feel like the podcast it's been overall a good thing, but maybe, all the late night recordings has caused a little bit of strife in my life.
And we may have averted a few arguments.
Maybe.
You never know.
Well, we could find out and rekindle them if they are there.
Yeah. We could just put our mics on mute and let them at it.
Yeah.
The comments I really enjoy is like folks from Australia or the EU just chiming in to say they listen. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, you know what? So I just saw this. I feel like I should mention it because I've had at least 2 questions in person about this. This is from Dimitri Barker. And she said, really enjoyed your podcast. Have been wondering who would have said Ray Hunt wasn't about the horse. I don't want to follow that podcast. I just wanted to ask. Wait. I'm just asking personally to avoid, and they didn't finish that sentence. I don't avoid what? I'm not sure.
Maybe.
I guess if you seek, you shall find. I've had more than one person ask about that. Buck had said something about somebody saying something about Ray Hunt on a previous episode. And, Buck's probably one of the most loyal people I know, and he was just standing up for a friend of his. It wasn't on this podcast. It's not anybody like we know or like we're mad at. There's nothing like that going on. It's just someone made a comment about Ray Hunt, and Buck was standing up for Ray. But I've had a few people ask me about that in person, and they kind of said the same thing. They're like, I don't really want to go follow that podcast, but which one is it? So if you seek around a little bit, you might find it. It's a good listen in its own right, I would have to say.
Yeah.
But no, we're our own deal. So we don't talk smack about anybody.
Like Ben said, it's no one we've had on.
No,
I wouldn't say we, no sort of vendetta we have or anything like that. But
no.
That you'll just have to do your own research, because I don't know about you, but for every person who does ask who it's about, there are people who 100% know who it's about and want to talk to me about that.
Yeah. So that's why we're not telling you where that podcast is, because not like you're in the dark or anything, but you can find that.
All right.
So I think
we need to wrap this up.
We got dinner, right?
Yeah, we got to go to dinner.
All right.
Write us in if you want us to talk about anything that's been burning on your minds. And again, thanks for listening, guys.
You bet.
We are out.
Yeah, we love you guys. And if we could have played Should Have Been a Cowboy, we would have done it here, but we don't want to lose our Spotify spot. So see ya.